Hello, Instagram family. I am here for another episode of Sensual Sovereignty Burn the Box with my beautiful guest, Mari de Luna. Let me tell you a little bit about her and then I'll bring her on. Mari is a sexuality coach and somatic trauma resolution guide. Mari specializes in nervous system regulation, trauma resolution, intimate relationships, authentic sexuality, developing healthy attachment, healing from child abuse, and sexual trauma. Just such powerful work. Her focus is to help release long-held patterns that impede energy flow and that keep us away from self-actualization. Her purpose is to guide individuals back to their innate blueprint of health and wellness beyond traumatic imprints and social conditioning, so that they can express their radiant truth and wholeness. Yes, I love that. Let's bring her on.
Hello, Sonali.
Oh, it's so good to see you.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, it's so lovely to see you. Oh my
Oh,
God.
it's been a while.
It has been. It has been a minute.
Oh, so this series, gosh, I think this is like number 10 now of these conversations. They were all about, we started with this idea of breathing life into the concept of sensual sovereignty that had been percolating for me for a couple of years at least, but it's just like words, and it's just, I wanted to talk to people about this and, see how it landed for them. So sensual sovereignty, I describe it as embodied love, liberation, and the license to expand the expression of our true essence. And with my first guest, this idea of stepping outside of boxes, burning boxes came up. And so it's kind of like that expanding, as we expand our essence, we no longer fit into like boxes, into constricted places. So it's very broad. And I'm wondering what feels alive for you with this, or are there boxes that you? I know there are.
Yes, many. Yeah. Wow. I just want to say, like, the series that you're putting out is such a important conversation. And I don't know if it is, well, happy new moon in Aries, by the way.
Yes.
But I don't know if it's like because of Aries season is so fiery
Yes.
that these conversations are feeling so on point to have at the moment. And with the spring just like popping everywhere, just there is like an energy that is emerging. And for me, it feels very outward. Like, through the winter, there was a lot of going in and sort of like a process of regeneration, but it was also intentionally to allow time for new things or new themes to emerge. And
Yes.
so I'm loving this invitation about reflecting on systems or beliefs or mental constructs that keep us in a box, that keep us, defined.
Right.
When it was so stimulating, right? When you prompted the subject of burning the box, and I was like, yes, let's light the mofo on like on fire. Let's light it up. And so much came to me. Like I feel like I have a lot to say, just like
Yes.
any person that you've had online. I love it that you're putting the emphasis on people of color. And I think this is what makes it more important for everybody. Because I feel like when you look at systems that oppress, it's
Mm-hmm.
important that we um we give the center to people who are marginalized,
Mm-hmm.
because it would be impossible to try to unpack or undo any system of oppression where the most marginalized is not centered,
That's right.
right? It just does not make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I absolutely applaud you and commend you for putting this together. And what a lovely invitation. I feel very, yeah, privileged in a way to use this platform to put my opinions out there.
Mm.
Yeah, when we go back to the subject of, again, burning the box, to me, what comes to mind immediately is, all the, capitalism, ableism, racism, right? Like all these huge
Yes.
systems that we have been born into,
Mm-hmm.
and that is impossible to undo by ourselves.
Right.
So thank goddess that we have platforms as like this, and people like you that are interested in hearing and listening and amplifying voices of others
Mm-hmm.
that can bring a different point of view
Mm-hmm.
for how systems are affecting us. So yeah, I mean, like that's what came up to mind when you invited me to these conversations, like so much, and where do we begin?
Exactly.
But yeah, like I find baby steps and doable steps, and going slow is actually what's needed here.
Mm.
For a lot of us will mean
Yes.
to listen to other people who have had less privilege,
Right.
um, and understand what is the role, right, that we each play into
Mm-hmm.
undoing, on unpacking, or even becoming an ally to people who are most marginalized. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you for reminding us that we are in the new moon in Aries. That was something when we were setting our day, like, let's do it on the new moon. And it does. I feel that that fire, and just like,
Mm-hmm.
what can we do? How do we take action? And as you pointed out, and everything that you're encompassing now in your work, because I know you're doing, we did the training together. That was like 4 years ago now.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
I
So
know,
long ago.
right?
It doesn't feel that long, but yes, it has been that long.
And I know that you've done so much more, and you're, just keep immersing yourself in this kind of work, and like the body, the nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really good reminder that you mentioned of like taking small steps,
Mm-hmm.
going slow, like, and so whether that's related to, if we go into like sexuality, pleasure, or activism, like actually, oh my gosh, I hope you can hear me. It looks like it's frozen a little bit. Um, like no matter where it is that we want to take action, taking those, taking it slow, going, going with small steps. Oh no, where is Mari? I hope it's not on my end with my internet, but I could see that something was a little bit off. It's just such a potent new moon and potent topic. Um, Gosh, let me check something. I was just checking my own internet. Yay!
Hello, I'm back.
Oh my gosh, I'm like talking and I could see something frozen. Then I was like, oh no. Reminds me of all these calls that we've been on when we were in the co-teaching, and suddenly it would like fall off.
Technology.
Anyway,
The energy is too potent.
that's what I was just saying. That's what I was just saying when we fell off. I'm like, oh, it's this potent new moon and potent energy. But I really want to highlight what you were sharing about going slow and taking small steps, because I think that applies to wherever we're taking action, or wherever we're wanting to implement change, to activate change. So that could be sexuality, sensuality, intimate relationships, or it could be activism, like
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about, and using our voice and trying to, even though it just feels heavy, like dismantle these
Yeah.
so oppressive systemic forces of patriarchy and capitalism and colonialism and
Mm-hmm.
racism and all the like isms, it's so these systems are, I would say, designed to
Mm-hmm.
burn out even more those who are oppressed by them, and it's like, and it's real, it's what happens. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, I wonder if you could speak to that at all, because you mentioned it about taking small steps and going slowly, and all this work that you've done with nervous system regulation and somatic experiencing and
Yeah.
embodiment.
Yeah, no, I think that that is so important, that
Mhm,
not only understanding that we can do something to change, that and it's, I feel like it is such an individual journey.
mhm,
Understanding first, we come into the realization that, living in all these oppressive systems
mhm,
are actually something that was imposed to us, that we were born into and did not consent to. And we're all getting burnt out by it. Whether it doesn't matter what privilege you have or hold,
mhm,
the systems are using us, right? Because the systems wouldn't be there without our contribution.
mhm,
But thank God there is information. Thank God there is that body wisdom that tells us, wait a minute, there is actually another way to do things, to
mhm,
be a mother, to be a lover, to, exist in the world and to express fully. That
mhm.
it doesn't have to be dictated by the government, or even by, by your parents. Like, it is such a unique expression. And
Mhm,
so, coming to that realization can be overwhelming, because in a sense, you may feel cheated, because the lies that were fed to you, growing up, that you to be a in this body as a woman, let's say, or as a cisgender woman,
yeah.
that you have to act this way, that you have to appear this way, or
Mhm,
in order to be successful, that you have to have a 9 to 5 job, and so on
mhm,
and so forth. So when you come to the realization, it's like, I can do life in a different way. I can express all that I am in a different way. It can be very overwhelming. So I feel like, the reckoning, the awakening happens in
mhm,
phases and in steps, baby
mhm,
steps, right?
mhm,
What helped me a lot was to be in community, um, you know, trying to see myself reflected in people that were doing this work. You know, unfortunately, and you know this, we've been in spaces where we haven't seen representation or enough representation of other ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I want to applaud you for being, you know, for spearheading this movement, right? Of being expressive and doing it in a way that feels authentic to you. And so, yeah, you know, talking about how to come to a place where you understand your role, I think it evolves over time. Um, you know, I can't tell you that I know exactly what my role is in society as to how to undo the systems. Um, but it is, you know, something that I'm giving myself, you know, all the compassion and going at a safe distance. Like I want to relate to the, you know, to the big systems in a way that it doesn't overwhelm me. I want to have safe distance to it. I want to have like a container where I know that I'm not gonna burn myself out thinking in the ways that I can contribute. So, you know, I mentioned the safe distance, a container, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also looking in a ways that it feels regenerative,
Yes.
because otherwise, what would be the point of trying to undo something that is consuming me if in
Right.
the process I'm burning myself out?
Exactly.
So yes, definitely. I think it takes a lot of and I'm pondering these days a lot on what is somatic consent and boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like how do you feel in
Mm-hmm.
your own body that this is a whole yes for you to step into whatever initiative,
Right.
whatever project. Um, and so it takes time. You
Mm-hmm.
know, the pace in anything we do, it's incredibly important because getting the feedback from your internal wisdom, right, that
Mm-hmm.
tells you this pace feels good or this action doesn't feel good, or let me do this action, but in a way that is maybe different than what I have seen in the past. So, yeah, it takes a lot of examination,
Mm-hmm.
but it also takes, you know, friendships like yours, because then I'm able to see I'm able to see that there's another way of going about things,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Mari. I want to acknowledge our friend Adrian says
Oh,
hello.
hi,
um, Nurse Julie, someone I've known for many, many years. There's a few people popping in. Just want to acknowledge that. And yes, I am feeling into listening to our bodies as we do this kind of work and as we find, because it's not clear, because the paths are not, well, we can find people to collaborate with or join forces with, or, you know, there are leaders out there when it comes to like this kind of activism, especially, but we're we're forging new paths, right? These are not, this path
Mhm.
wasn't there because if it were, then the systemic oppression wouldn't have gotten there in the first place, right? So we're like trying to go against something that has a lot of power, that's like almost like machinery, you know, designed again to like keep people keep people quiet, keep people
Mhm.
not seen, keep people oppressed, you know, and it's, I'm learning so much as well. It's like, how do we, what do we do, how do we take action?
Mhm.
We're in this Aries fiery spring kind of energy, and I do think like what you're saying and kind of what started even this little like having these conversations, it was about connecting with other people and amplifying voices, and at least start this like there's so much to be learned from those of us that identify um, in the marginalized or in the oppressed. There's so much to be learned for those of us that are trying to do our work and put it out there and are facing what we're all facing really. But have to
Mm-hmm.
work through even more layers of what's there. Um, I'm
Yeah.
thinking of I'm thinking of our work, the work that how we met, this like embodiment work, sexuality, but really like
Mm-hmm.
as part of that, connecting to the body and being able to, I mean, for me, that was very powerful to, for me, that's what led to, like, it took me on a different path then because suddenly I was more aware of what I'm holding in my body, what's mine and what's not mine, even like what's actually been part of ancestry and family
Mm-hmm.
and culture and conditioning, but that I was also holding.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering for you what um, I just am curious about your own journey with that and perhaps doing all this embodiment work that you've been doing and trauma work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what that's open for you or how that looked for you.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that question, Sonali.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I also, as we were talking about the Aries season, again, the fire is it's just so it's in the air almost. And I keep reminding myself to pause because again, the path to liberation and embodiment is slow, is slow, is titrated, and it's small bites. It's a digestible process.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that when I first started, when we first met in that training, that it had so much information
Mhm.
and it required so much, not only intellectual, but also bringing bringing your body into the
Mhm.
practices, right? Because sexuality is is an embodied thing. Um, I I I suffer some burnout from that. Partly my conditioning of being a good student and checking off the boxes. I completed this, I completed that, and I overrode a lot of my self boundaries.
Yes.
Um, and so that was a concept that I understood, through my own, I guess, my own detriment and my own exhaustion.
Mhm.
But it was incredible at the end to tell myself, come to a conclusion that it is so worth taking the time and checking in to see how authentic the feelings that you're feeling and the impetus to take
Mhm.
action towards something is, whether it is from your own desire or whether it is externally imposed, or
Mhm.
even if it comes from past generations, the emergency that I have inherited from my mother. I remember, being a little child and my mother telling me, hurry up, you're too slow. And so that has been a lifelong journey for me to unlearn,
Yeah.
to tell myself, why do I need to hurry? There's no hurry.
Right.
And so, yes, I feel it is such a unique journey to each of us. There is,
Mhm.
that unique path of
Mhm.
undoing
Mhm.
certain beliefs
Mhm.
and certain, even traditions that were passed down from our families that were actually deemed, there was a lot of pride
Mhm.
in being punctual or achieving, getting degrees, certifications, and being married and having all the things. And for me, it has been a lot of like, what is my own unique desire as a, as a person living right here, right now in these times. And let me tell you, it looks so different than what my family had in store for me. And that is brilliant. That is so okay.
Yeah.
When thinking of the concept of undoing a lot of generational trauma.
Mhm.
And yeah, and through this healing journey of, I've now I understand the concept of chosen family versus like the given family. Because it could be a process where you lose belonging, right? The belonging that you attributed to that family, of that blood family, right? The traditions and conditioning that was inherited, and that all of a sudden you're confronted with, this is not my truth. Thank you, but it is not my truth. And so then what does that mean? Does that mean that you don't belong
Mhm.
here? And
Mhm.
so yeah, and through connecting to my ancestors, to the land of
Mhm.
origin where I come from, which is not here where I reside, but
Yeah.
also connecting to the land here where that I occupied nowadays,
Yes.
has given me that bridge of belonging to
Mhm.
this earth, even though traditionally I don't follow, where I come from, my roots. Um, but it is that reckoning of, this is exactly where I belong, right here,
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
with my own set of beliefs.
Mhm.
And that discerning process can be very painful, because it means like a separation. So that security that you attributed to being to follow certain rules and certain
Mhm.
systems is not longer. So
Mhm.
it takes courage, it takes bravery, it also takes community, it takes, a lot of being embodied in your truth to be able to stay the course.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So
Mm.
beautiful. I noticed someone is saying hi to you.
Hello, hello.
um, I there were several things that you mentioned that really landed. I mean, it was all so good. But you mentioned one thing that you mentioned really early on in what you shared here is about the override.
Mhm.
And I just want to, that really, it's so important, I feel like, that concept, and that as people of color, especially, like
Mm.
that is, um, we learn, or such a big group. But I do think it does apply to most people who would identify as that we learn early on to override. We
Mhm.
learn early on, so we learn. It could be from our families that we're born into, raised by, but also the culture. It's just it becomes, because I'm reflecting back that what you shared about that, because it comes up over and over again. And it's part of that process of unlearning, and part of that process of, as we slowly like get connected more to our own bodies and our own desires, like what do we want, um, what is our truth, that we have to then do this unlearning of this override. Because the override comes in, I think, very early. I know for me it was very early, because it wasn't ever about like what I wanted, or what pace I wanted to go. And I was also slow growing up, very slow doing things. And that urgency of like, hurry up. And that has been that alone has been so huge to reflect on the other things that you mentioned of connecting to the body, of a belonging, connecting to the land. Like all of that is going against, is unlearning, undoing the override. Because it's like, no, I'm going to slow down here. I'm going to connect to right where I am. I'm going to connect to the land that I'm occupying. I'm going to connect to the body and the space that I'm occupying here. And that brings us into so much truth and so much of our true essence as I think of it sometimes. Yeah, the undoing, unlearning of the override.
Mm. I think that is the path to sovereignty,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So when
Yeah.
you're able to get so rooted into your desire,
Mhm.
it is the voice becomes louder
Mhm.
than your beliefs. That the construct, the mental construct that tells you, but we've always done it this way. So that
Yeah.
sovereignty, when you're so rooted in that voice that tells you no,
Mm.
that may be the way it was done in the past, but I know that there is another way, or you may use sort of the template of how things have been done in the past, but you may be able to tweak it. You may be able to have accommodations, bring pleasure, bring more resource to your nervous system, widen that base of support that, because let's be real, we need money to exist in this system,
Abs-
right? And so perhaps we cannot, undo capitalism like now in our generation, I don't think. Um, but how can we, exist within this extractive system with more pleasure, with more embodiment, with bringing more ways that are regenerative,
mm,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think that requires a lot of imagination, a lot of creativity, and in order for us to be creative and be innovators, we need to be embodied.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because otherwise, we're just copying from what has been done in the past.
That's right. All the things that have been like, yeah, passed down and all the ways of this is how it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
Mari, I would love to hear from you. We mentioned the resourcing, the embodiment, being creative. Um, what's coming to you? What can you share about resourcing? 'Cause I know that you know
Mm-hmm.
so much about that.
Yes, I love talking about any ways that nourish us, any way that can bring, regeneration, rejuvenation, any way that, can make us feel enlivened. And
Mhm.
so resourcing is a fancy word for pleasure, for anything that is nourishing.
Yes.
um Resourcing can, I like to think of resourcing in terms of qualities.
Mhm.
And so for some can be something that is soothing, that is calming, that is relaxing, that is expansive, that is slow.
Mhm.
um yeah, so if you can think of qualities of, when in your childhood, things that, bring you a sense of being more in the present,
Mhm.
um, then use that. Resourcing can be anything internal in your body, a
Mhm.
place, a physical place in your body,
Mhm.
or in your mind. It could be memories that can bring a sense to your whole body of feeling good. Or resourcing can be something external. It can be an object, a person, And it could be also more in the imaginative realm, like any divine presence, angels, or loved ones that have passed on, your ancestors, could
Mm-hmm.
be nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, and in terms of resourcing is what helps you come to the present moment, what helps you have more capacity to be with what is happening with the present. And so um, so the whole objective of have more capacity is not to be happy all the time or to be relaxed all the time. The whole objective to have more capacity is to be able to sit with your reality in a way that it doesn't feel overwhelming, in a way that it doesn't take you off your center.
Yes. Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, I so appreciate that what you shared at the end. Like, it's not with the resourcing, it's not about having a goal, right? Like,
Mm,
I'm going to feel pleasure or I'm going to feel relaxed. It's kind of like that, as you mentioned, like sitting in the present, um, allowing some space. Right? That's what's
mhm.
important to me for whatever is present. But we're like, as we resource, and yet it is a fancy term. I mean, you and I use this term, but yeah, as we soften, right, and as we like almost like expand more into the present, then we can hold more of what is there, right, without
Mhm.
going into some kind of a stress response or shutdown. You know, there's
Yeah.
this whole process of like burnout or um, as we're taking lots of action without creating this
Mhm.
expanded capacity to hold what's there, it can be very detrimental, even with like good intentions or you
Yes. Yes. And to go back to the boxes that we live in, as much as we would like to just line them up and burn them all, we kind of still need them. We kind of still, it's going to be here. Like some of them, like capitalism is going to be here. And we're going to somehow have to be creative to find a way to live within capitalism in a way that it doesn't burn us out.
know.
And so I feel that, bringing more capacity, more presence, more joy, and even talking about joy. I, I had to build capacity to hold joy. And it kind of did my head in when I was feeling kind of overwhelmed
Yeah.
by feelings of joy, because what would be an objection to feel joy? Like, why
Mhm.
would you object to feel
Mhm.
joy?
Mhm.
And then I understood, like, oh my goodness, I have no capacity or very little capacity for intensity, and joy can also feel intense to me sometimes. So let me learn more about expanding capacity. And so that's when I embarked on that journey of, embodiment.
Yes.
Yes, because in these moments, these times when, we're sort of, I don't know if it's safe to say that we're already done with the pandemic, but it feels like we are coming out. It feels like we're entering another era in these days. And so yes, we all need to increase capacity to step into the new,
Mhm.
whatever that means.
Mhm.
So yeah, and capacity not only to live in, within capitalism and needing to produce, but building capacity also to hold joy and to hold pleasure, to hold what feels regenerative, connection, building connections. That also requires a little bit of capacity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, it's such a good point. Like, I really love it. We, like this expansion and increased capacity allows us to hold more of the good experiences too, and that in itself is helping us to resource with other experiences that might be challenging, that might be um, that just might be difficult, I suppose, and
Mm-hmm.
as we can be in that present, expand, hold capacity, it's like it gives us fuel, it gives us energy, it gives us vitality, to go forth with, to go through all of this, to go through, because like you said, a lot of these oppressive kind of forces, this is going to take time, who knows how long, but how can we be with them as they're existing and not be burnt out by them, and not be and not find ourselves constricted into like smaller boxes because of all of these different forces. But how do we expand our capacity to hold the the beautiful experiences, the joy, the happiness, the love, the pleasure, all of that, like that in itself allows us to be more expanded amidst
Mm-hmm.
the boxes that are still there, but we're not like suppressed and oppressed by them as much.
Yes, yes, yes to all of that. Yeah, and I think it brings us back to like the beginning of the conversation and
Mhm,
like understanding the role that we play um, in undoing like
mhm,
these systems. I think it's pivotal that we understand the concept of building capacity in order to like step into any role, any, any. I mean, unless you choose to be, like a what do they call it, like the standby, like a looker, like no action.
right,
If
right.
it's if you choose that, then maybe not so it's not so relevant. But as we try to figure out how to be, how to exist, and playing a role here, definitely it's essential that we
Mhm.
understand more how to be embodied, um, like tap into that beautiful, you call it, what is it, body sovereignty, sensual sovereignty.
Essential sovereignty.
Oh my goodness, yes, that couldn't it's such a beautiful way of being, and like it's an art,
Hmm.
and it is simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
It is like a basic concept, but it's not easy. And it's not
Hmm.
easy because these boxes,
Hmm.
right? These
Yes.
constructs, because how easy it is for you to be in your full expression if you had seen it modeled by your parents, by your community,
Hmm.
in your school, if you had mentors from when you
Hmm.
were a little child,
Hmm.
it would be so easy. It would be normal and natural.
Hmm.
But it's not, because the systems tell you it's manipulative, it's extractive.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so then you have to learn to override your needs.
Hmm.
What needs? You like, I remember not being able to say what I needed, not because I didn't know, but because I couldn't sense it for myself.
Right.
Basic needs of eating or going to the bathroom.
Hmm.
Why? Because I wasn't embodied.
Hmm.
Because, I was told not to interrupt, or
Hmm.
to suck it up or being in a hurry. And so the unlearning process is a long, long process, but it's so worth it.
Mm-hmm.
So worth it.
Yes. Oh, yes. It is so worth it. And it's so important. And I think like our generation has, because perhaps, well, what I have found, I mean, this bring with me, like what I found, like in reflecting on all of this, is that my parents' generation, they didn't have the, not only did they not have the capacity, but they had no, it wasn't something that was on their radar. Like there's so many other, there was so much more related to like just survival and just like living and making a living and, you know, all these things that just took up all of their time and energy, raising family, making like all these things. And I feel like in our generation, or at least this is what I notice, and by talking to people like you and others, that we can actually, we have an opportunity to increase our capacity, to allow this process and to unlearn the override. And I'm also thinking, I hope it's okay to bring up that I know your mother, and I know we've had conversations like you're in this role of increasing your own capacity, doing all these different trainings and really going into the trauma work, the embodiment work. And then you also are a mother. And so like I'm curious even what you found in that role about continuing the unlearning for your daughter, and like what that has been for you.
Yeah. So, you know, I feel my daughter wasn't receptive at all to these teachings. And I know it's because the present time puts so much emphasis on the logic, on the brain, on textbooks, and the present generations tend to forget the wisdom of the past, of the body. And it's part of colonialism, right? It's part of us departing from our innate wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And so I bought into that when I was, growing up as well. And so it's gonna take it's gonna take a minute for her to jump on that wagon. But it's also part of, and I know it's doing its work
Mm-hmm.
because I'm given so much space for
Mm-hmm.
her to come into her own conclusions. Um, thing It's a thing that was not afforded for me when I was growing up. The demands were given to me. It was like orders that were given to me. And so for her, I'm doing something different where I'm letting her come to her own discernment of
Mm-hmm.
what it is that feels resonant as truth for her. And so even though she may not follow what I say, I know that the things that she sees me doing
Mm-hmm.
are percolating and are having an effect on her. And yeah, I mean, my biggest dream would be for her to continue the legacy of decolonizing the psyche, the mind, and the body. And but one can only hope. I'm doing my part by coming back to my body, by coming back to earth, you know,
Mm-hmm.
earth being by my body. And
Yes.
yes. So,
Oh, it's beautiful. And I can imagine, yes, it doesn't happen just like, oh, my mother's doing this work. I'm like, like that's really not how it works.
I
My,
wish.
my experience of working with a lot of teens and families and, like that kind of work before doing this work. But I just, what you are doing and what you mentioned, I just need to highlight that because you giving your daughter space is just a huge thing that we didn't have, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, like, not putting any of your desires, like, not projecting onto her, not like pushing her in some direction, but just giving that space and trusting that she's going through her own process and is evolving and will come to her own decisions, will come to her own truth. And at some point, that's when it might be like, oh, you know, when that type of inquiry is coming in, when it becomes more relevant, perhaps,
Yes.
you know, then yeah, then you see what what happens. But just to
Yeah.
back away a bit, and just give that space. This is amazing. This is what very few parents do that I've seen.
Oh my God, yes. That is huge. I remember growing up, that you would be told, oh, give so and so a hug and say hello and things like that. And I'm like, why would we do that? No, teach your children to let their bodies, guide their actions,
Mhm.
not from a imposing anything onto them, and let them come to, obviously you need to guide your children,
Yeah.
but not imposing.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. Oh, so enjoyed this conversation, and I want to ask before we find out like where people can find you in your work and all of that, if there's anything else that feels like it needs to be spoken or um, any any threads that we didn't like.
Mm. I think we've been over so many like different topics.
Yes.
I think the concept is so juicy of burning things. I love burning things in this Aries season. But what I would love to leave people with is,
Mhm.
understanding the role that we have, and you know, first coming to the realization that there are different ways of doing things. When it comes to living in systems that extract.
Mhm.
So understanding that no, that is not the only way that we can exist,
Mhm.
that there are ways that are more nourishing and regenerative, that we can
Mhm.
exist
Mhm.
still within structures of, such as capitalism,
Mhm.
but we can give back to our bodies. We can begin a process of decolonization, and we can do this with lots of slowness and juiciness and pleasure and communion with others.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that's the message that I would like to like highlight, if you will.
Yes. Oh, thank you. That felt so good to hear that and to feel that in my body.
Mm.
Love it. Um, so tell us where we can find your work, if there's any offering that's really alive for you right now.
Yeah.
That.
Thank you for that, Sonali.
Mhm.
So I'm here on Instagram as Mari de Luna _empowered.
Mhm.
You can also find me on my website, marideluna.com.
Mhm.
And at the moment, I'm accepting applications for one-on-one work. So you can inquire in my website about that.
Beautiful. Oh, oh, thank you so much. I just
Mm.
really appreciate being on this like path with you and connect. It's been a little while, like I said, but just we've connected at I think it's just some important times, the pandemic when it just suddenly. we're in the middle of guiding others on this coaching work, and yeah, just to know, just to see like the other work you're doing and how it's all evolving. I'm very excited to see how it continues to evolve, and for anyone that works with you, it's such a gift.
Oh,
So much
thank
to
you.
offer.
Thank you so much, Sonali. Likewise, that time we were connected in 2020 during the pandemic was so important, right? So important to have that closed space between us, that little pod that we had. And yes, thank you so much for that contribution, those contributions that you made. Then, like, it influenced me a lot. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your energy, and for just being a leader. Thank you so much for bringing this work here.
Oh, thank you, Maddie. I can really say the same for you as being a leader and forging, like, as we step out of boxes, we're like leaning into unknown territory, and just kind of taking those steps. It's really,
Mm-hmm.
really incredible to witness. Yeah, so grateful for you.
Yes, likewise.
Well, thank you. Enjoy the rest of this new moon. I am so feeling this Aries. I do want to, like, what can we burn? No.
Let's begin with a candle.
Let's get the candle. Put some intentions in there to like release and invite
Yes.
in some things. Yeah. Oh.
Thank you so much for having me in this juicy, juicy conversation that was also fiery. I loved it.
It was like juice and fire.
Yes.
And the potent new moon energy all together.
Yes.
So I will be sharing this, and I also have been putting these on YouTube. I don't have like a YouTube following at all, but it's just easier to share. So for anyone who wants to listen, just like you said in the beginning, like listen. I think these
Yeah.
conversations are so potent for that, to listen and take in different voices, different perspectives from the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
There's just
Absolutely.
power in that, and anyone who wishes to lean in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
But until next time, and yeah, we'll share everything, and people can find us,
Mm-hmm.
find you and your work.
Thank you so much, Sonali.
Thank you.
Mwah. Bye.
Bye.